Have you ever been to a place that's been on your bucket list for more years than you remember? And worried that it would not live up to your dreams and expectations of it? And then it does. And then some. This is the story of our journey around Iceland, and a landscape that I found so deeply inspiring that I drew it every moment that I could. For my 60th birthday, I decided I wanted experiences rather than things. There are enough things in the world already. I went to Iceland fully expecting that I would be drawing outside in that environment every day. But the reality was a little bit different to that. Heading out from Reykjavik that first day to the Akranes Lighthouse, we got our first taste of the raw power of the weather in Iceland. Something that I attempted to catch in the first major sketch of the trip. This was of the lighthouse at Akranes, just the most beautiful place, but extremely wild wind and grey skies and wild weather. The sensation of standing in that and being blasted by it was absolutely amazing. We returned to Reykjavik, excited for what was to come in the following days. I took multiple sketchbooks with me to Iceland. I'm going to start with my little orange field notebook. Now, what I loved about this was I could stick this and a pencil in my pocket, and whenever I saw anything on the road that was interesting or caught my eye, I would do a very quick tonal drawing or a very quick continuous line drawing, and just to capture textures and shapes and line. So I started doing this on the Lost Coast Trail last year because I found this to be a really amazing way of remembering the physical topography of a place that I'm in. As we drove through that amazing landscape, whenever I saw anything interesting, I would quickly make notes in this little pocket sketchbook. Where this really came into its own was when we went hiking on the Fjallsjökull Glacier. As soon as I set foot on the glacier, I knew I wanted to draw it. The colours, the texture, the smattering of volcano ash that dusted the surface, accentuating the shapes. The deep, dark teal fading into the white of the ice. I knew I wouldn't have a lot of time to sketch, so I used my mini notebook to capture some very quick, rough field notes while I could. These I would use later back in our hotel room to develop out fuller sketches of that amazing experience. So after capturing this little mini drawing, I immediately leapt in and started trying to capture the sense of the ice, the blueness of it, and the layering and the sense of depth of it. And then also these very dark crevasses and very dark volcanic dust and ash that scattered over the surface. Was just the most incredible visual feast. And again, this is another one of the glacier, just looking up into one of the crevices and how that blue just intensifies as the ice gets deeper and thicker. While hiking on the glacier was definitely a peak experience of our trip, we'd experienced the crowds of the south the day before, and this had really shifted how we thought about our time in Iceland.
What we decided after all the crowds yesterday was that we were going to avoid places with crowds. We're here to not put massive pressure and impact on the environment. We're here for the lived experience and to minimise the impact on nature of being here as much as we can. A little hypocritical, I know, but we're not here to tick the checklist of items off the Iceland bucket list. So less about Iceland as spectacle, and it is spectacular, let's face it, and more about Iceland as lived experience, and that's the goal.
We'd experienced a taste of this the day before when we hiked up behind the Seljalandsfoss waterfall, away from the crowds milling in the valley below. The vistas from up there were magnificent, stretching out as far as the eye could see, with the water tumbling between rocks and gorges down towards the waterfall below. This sketch was inspired by that amazing walk, the beautiful bright green colour of the hills and the rich dark browns and purples of the rocks with the water flowing through the gorge. This is watercolor and gouache and some neocolor twos. And the next day we headed away from the crowds and into the Highlands. The weather had taken a turn for the colder, and the landscape was dusted with an icing sugar coating of snow. The crowds were gone, and we began to experience the magnificence that is Iceland. Alright, I have a cold and so I sound a bit weird, but we are just driving through the most amazing scenery and just the contrast of the black rock poking through the snow and the snow, but there's just the most beautiful tonal kind of interplay. It's just the most incredible place. We hopped out of the car to take some photos and man, it was cold. So yeah, definitely not for the faint-hearted, I don't think. And it's not even winter yet, so yeah, there's that. This is up in the Highlands and just standing on this amazing ice field, just looking out at the vista and the sense of space and distance, but also being blasted with icy wind. This sketch was inspired by that dramatic tonal contrast between the snow and the dark volcanic rock poking through it. We knew that following the guides would take us to where the Instagram crowds were, and our new approach of following our curiosity led us instead to some incredible places. In response to the dramatic landscape, the marks I used became more minimal and gestural, seeking to capture the geological energy of the place. That geological energy is just so evident in the whole landscape. Everywhere you look, you can see the evidence of volcanic activity and the evidence of glaciers scraping the landscape over millennia. And it's so raw and so present. I think partly because there's not a huge amount of other vegetation, and so it's just exposed, just present in a way that is not so obvious when you have forests and other landscape elements over the top. It really is very, very stunningly beautiful and very raw. Our realization that friction meant fewer crowds led us miles down dirt roads and along trails to waterfalls that few others visited. And eventually drew us to the Westfjords. While I'd relished every minute of our trip so far, it was here that I fell deeply in love with this country and this landscape.
Covered in coves of feathery moss, but you are still in my mind. Still in my mind.
It's so spectacular and so magical here. And just to be here, breathing in the fresh air and hiking through this amazing wild place. Yeah, absolutely a privilege. I feel very fortunate that I'm able to do this, and super inspired by all the landscapes and patterns and water and reflections and mountains and valleys and plants that I'm seeing. This is, I think, one of my favourite paintings that I did on the trip. Just super loose and sketchy, just capturing the impression and the sensation of being in that place, and just the lines of the hills, and just very sparsely and very quickly laid down. Yeah, I really like this one. We spent the next few days exploring the areas around Brieðtavik and Westfjords.
Don't leave. Do you remember when we first met? At night, under the moon.
On the beach, where you had the juxtaposition of the dark browny black sand and the edge where the river was carving through, and then bright pops of plants that really stood out against the black of the sand. It's very dramatic and quite wonderful. There it is.
Would you then give us one more try? Or is it too late now?
This was one that I did of Dynjandi, which was just the most spectacular fall. I'd seen photographs of that waterfall and I was like, oh yeah, it's a waterfall. And then when I got there, I realized how big it was. And we hiked up to the base of the main fall, and there was this amazing red rock in the cliffs, and then of course the bright green of the vegetation, and then a huge amount of water just spilling down, and we got quite wet from the spray standing there. It was the most wonderful feeling.
And before starting the drive back to Reykjavik, we had one last stop we wanted to make, the Látrabjarg Bird Sanctuary.
Would you then give us one more try?
We're here at the Látrabjarg Bird Sanctuary, which is a 14-kilometre stretch of cliffs that it plays host over the summer to the nesting of many, many species of birds, including puffins and guillemots and all sorts of different kinds of birds, but mostly they're gone by mid-August, and we're here heading towards the end of September, so the chance of seeing birds is pretty remote, but it is a spectacular hike along the cliffs with precipitous drop down to the ocean and the most glorious views, and we have this whole remote and desolate place all to ourselves. It's magical and spectacularly beautiful. You know, I come to places like this where nature is so dominant and so wild and so beautiful and so remote, and it just makes me realize how small and insignificant I am, and how important it is that we have these places that just remind us of our place in the world.
And then this is another one of my favourites. This was of Látrabjarg. Of course, we were way too late in the season for the birds to be nesting. The only birds we saw were kind of way out to sea, and I can't blame them. It was pretty cold and bleak up there. But these amazing dramatic cliffs with the bright pop of the very, very green grass that was growing on top of the cliffs. And super fast, super loose, very gestural and minimal. I was super happy with this one.
We headed back to Brieðtavik, where we were staying the night, and I finally felt well enough from my cold to walk down to the beach and do some plein air sketching. This was why I had come to Iceland. And while this is what I pictured myself doing every day, my cold and the weather had different ideas. But I was very grateful that I'd managed to do this on our last day in Iceland.
And what I love about this is you can see all this speckling is actually sand that blew into my drawing. And then I did this other really quick sketch when I was back in the hotel room, just capturing the headland and the beach and the sweep of the beach.
I left a piece of my heart in that country. So beautiful, so wild,
So dramatic. I'll definitely be back there again one day. And if you enjoyed this video, you might like a recent video that I made of a drawing trip I took to the wild south coast of Oregon during winter. Don't forget, if you want to catch up with my work on a more regular basis, you can find me on Instagram at Clarebond Art. And with massive thanks to my dear husband and partner on this trip, who contributed some of the B-roll. I'm so glad he was there to share this amazing experience with me. And in the meantime, take care and bye for now.
Wait on me.